I am 33, female. My husband is 40, male. We have been married for 14 years. Before I met my husband, I had a boyfriend who I was dating since my teens. He loved me so much. He loved me more than I loved him. I cheated on him with my husband and ended up marrying my husband. My ex-boyfriend wanted to propose to me, but he didn't have the financial means and was living with his parents. I have always been a hard-working woman, but at that time I wanted a man with means and was already set up financially. My boyfriend was still not mature enough for me. He's full of promises, but didn't have any job. Back then, he couldn't even afford a wedding ring, but was always promising to get married to me. I was more practical and want someone that was already established. After I cheated on my ex-boyfriend, I intentionally exposed it so he would know and leave me. He resented me and my future husband for that, and he had several public clashes with my husband. I knew my ex-boyfriend loved me, but I was too selfish back then to even notice how much I hurt him. The truth is, I chose my husband because he was the best choice for me at that time. He had the resources and had the means to provide for my future family. After we got married, we struggled a little bit before we started having children. I was a superstitious person, so I thought maybe my ex-boyfriend cursed us. The first one came after 5 years of marriage. We wanted our first kid right away after marriage, but we tried and tried and tried. At some point, we thought there was something wrong with us. We visited hospitals, we went for prayers, we drank the undrinkable, and did everything just to have kids. It never happened for us until 5 years later when I got pregnant. It was the happiest day of our lives. The pregnancy aside, our fears of not having a child was assuaged. We felt whole again. We felt capable. We felt like a family who has it all and can have it all. Our second child didn't waste time coming. It came when we were not even thinking of having a second child. The first one was barely 2 years old when I got pregnant again. 3 months after delivery, the pandemic happened. We were protecting our lives from harm, so we went around wearing nose masks and using hand sanitizers. There was nothing we wouldn't do to protect our jobs. I know just one thing to do to be able to protect my job. I would have gone all out to do it, just to keep my job and remain employed. I was on maternity leave when I was laid off. It was a good job. It didn't pay much, but it paid well enough to live a comfortable life, me and my husband. I remember waking up and thinking how bleak the future would be without my job. I remember crying at night and asking my husband where I was going to get a new job like that. I got so depressed and ran out of breast milk for my baby. My husband came through with motivation I needed. He assured me to stay calm and rather concentrate on the kids. There is always a blessing in and around the corners. There is always a blessing in and around the corners, he said. Let's look for the blessing in this situation so we don't become ungrateful to God. I searched far and low. It was hard to see blessing in that. All I saw was trouble in the future and an unemployed woman who was going to depend on her husband. Nobody has ever changed her situation through thinking. So at some point, I stopped thinking and instead concentrate on raising our kids. Some people had jobs, but don't have children. I remember my struggles when I didn't have a child. I had a job, yet I had no peace in my spirit. The blessing is these kids. I would have time to be with them, raise them the way I want. When the time is right, I will get a new job. My husband proved capable. He provided for us and assured that we lacked nothing. The good thing is, he didn't wait for me to ask before he provided. Sometimes, he did things that made me ask myself, is this man in my head? I would be thinking of fixing my hair. The only reason I would delay is because of money. Just when I'm thinking about how and when, he would walk up to me and say, "Here, I don't know what you would do with it. Maybe you can get a new hair or something." To have a man think that way of you, and provide for your needs, make you feel all good things in your body. You will want to leave him, so you will marry him again and start the love afresh. My second child was a year and a half old, but I still don't have a job. I had sent a couple of resumes around, but none had yielded any result. I told him, I have some savings. I want to use it to start something that will earn me a little. When someday I get a job, I can stop it and enter the corporate world again. He answered, you don't have to worry so much. Keep sending resumes. Keep your money. Look at the situation in the world. It's not easy to start a business now. If you don't take care, you will lose your money. I didn't listen. I wanted to start something. One day I was searching online trying to find out things that I could do to keep myself busy. I came across a website that supplies personal sanitary equipment, wholesale. And what do you know? The name of my ex-boyfriend was listed as the manager of the company. It's been 10 years since I cheated on him and dumped him, and I haven't looked back. I heard he has started a family, but I didn't pay attention. The way he reacted when I left him was embarrassing and left a bad taste in my mouth. But I was curious now that I found out that he was running a medium-sized company that distributes personal protective equipment, among other things. I looked him up on Facebook and went to his profile. He was now a father of 2. There were no women in the picture, and his relationship status was not available. So I didn't know if he was married at the time, but I assumed he was. He looked very professional and proper, unlike how he used to look when we dated. I felt the need to message him. I expected him to respond when I sent him a message, but it took 2 days for him to respond. He didn't bring up the circumstances in which we separated, and I was glad he didn't, which made me assume he was over it. I informed him about my desire to be a distributor for personal sanitary equipment, and he told me to visit his office so we would have a meeting. When I came to his office, his secretary told me to wait in the lobby because he was having a meeting before me. About 15 minutes after my meeting was scheduled to start, he came out of his office and invited me in. He apologized for making me wait, and I told him that it was my pleasure. I stepped into his office and was surprised at how large and furnished it was. It was almost the size of my living room. It was clear that he has made it. Pictures on his wall boast of his achievements. I mentioned that I didn't know he went to the university or got an MBA. He said that I gave him the wake-up call, and it was all thanks to me. He said that he has been having meetings all morning and wanted to go to lunch, so he invited me to lunch. We drove in his car to a restaurant not far from his work. On our way to the restaurant, I asked him about his wife, and he told me that he separated from his wife because she felt like he was working too hard. I responded to him that when we were together, I couldn't get him to work, but now women are leaving him because he wouldn't stop working. He laughed at the irony. He corrected me by saying that she didn't leave him. He left her. It seemed awkward to me the way he tried to draw attention to the fact that he left her and not the other way around. I would soon find out later why he felt the need to correct that error. I was surprised that he wasn't mad or upset at me. I kept waiting for him to show anger and frustration because of the way our relationship ended, but it seems like he was completely over it and had moved on. During our lunch, he didn't ask me about my private life or about my husband. It was all business. He discussed about logistic and distribution of items. I found out that the sanitary supply was just a fraction of his business, and he never deals with private distributors like me, but he would make an exception for my sake. I was intimidated by him. Even his word choice was more sophisticated. At the end of the meeting, I find myself saying yes, sir, to everything he said. At the end of the meeting, he advises me on what I was supposed to do and explained to me the ropes of how to be successful. When I got home that day, I didn't tell my husband that I had a meeting with my ex-boyfriend because I know how much he hated my ex. I know how much they fought for me in public places. My ex-boyfriend appeared to be over it. However, I don't think my husband was. Moreover, if I had told my husband about the meeting with my ex-boyfriend, he would have been upset with me and prevented me from doing it. When I went to bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I never left him. What kind of life would I have lived? I would have been the wife of a wealthy man, but I later shut down the idea because separating from him gave him the motivation to be a better man, to be a rich man. I received the shipment from my ex-boyfriend's company. The following week, I reached out to my former company procurement unit. I told them, I can supply your COVID equipment. Kindly do me this favor. I'm still at home, and this is the least you can do to help me. They accepted my offer, so I started selling to them. They will put in a request, and I will procure the item for them. I spoke to a few other companies. 2 of them accepted my offer, so I was supplying them. At first, the money was good, but as the pandemic protocol observation went down, it also affected sales. But I was okay. It was better than nothing at all. I would text my ex-boyfriend time to time, and he would respond, but not all the time. I felt either he was too busy or playing hard to get. I felt the need to be close to him and build some sort of relationship with him. One day I was able to get him to take me out for lunch again. During lunch, he told me to come over with my kids during the weekend so I could babysit for him. I was excited about seeing his house. I lied to my husband where I was going. That Saturday afternoon, I went to his house. He had 2 small kids. The youngest was 3 years old. It was his turn to look after the kids, but he told me that his babysitter was off that day, and he was meeting with someone. Come to find out, the person he was meeting up with was another woman. He had a date with a woman, and he wanted someone to babysit his 2 kids. It was then that I realized he wasn't seeing me as a potential sexual interest. He brought the woman home after their date. She looked like she was in her early 20s, and he introduced me as an old friend while I was downstairs like a grandma watching TV with his kids and mine. I felt humiliated. I felt kind of slighted, like he was being childish. I caught myself several times thinking that I should be that woman, or that he brought me here to humiliate me for what I did to him. I had to remind myself that I was married and shouldn't be thinking about that, and that he was single and free to sleep with whomever he wants. Although I thought he should have waited till his kids were with his ex-wife before bringing a woman in his house to sleep with. I remember my husband calling me that night asking me where I was, and I told him that I was babysitting for a friend. After his kids went to bed, I texted him that I was leaving because my kids must go to bed as well, and he came downstairs to walk me out. After that day, I tried to limit my contact with him. I was the one reaching out, so it didn't change anything from his angle. As the pandemic started to wane and the restrictions were relaxed, my business dropped drastically, and I was barely getting any sale. I was having to depend on my husband a lot more. My husband was an average middle-class earner, so I caught myself feeling like he should be making a lot more money. I was snapping at him and resenting him, and he noticed. I tried to control my anger towards him when I realized that I was comparing him to my ex-boyfriend. A few weeks later, my sanitizer business grinded to a halt. I was 100% dependent on my husband. I wanted to reach out to my ex-boyfriend for an opportunity, but I was too prideful about the humiliation several weeks ago. Then one day, out of the blue, my ex-boyfriend called me and invited me and my kids to a picnic. When I saw his number on my caller ID, I felt a rush of excitement that I've never felt in a long time. I asked him if he was inviting me so he could get a chance to sleep with another woman, and he responded that his kids won't stop talking about my kids since we came over. As bad as I wanted to decline the invitation, I still wanted to see him. I still wanted to be around him. Thinking about him bring excitement to me. I agreed, And once again, I didn't tell my husband. We went to a picnic together. I brought my kids, and he brought his kids as well. It was like old times. No inhibition or pressure. We picked up from where we left off. I told him about my unemployment status, and he told me about an opportunity with another company that he knows. He told me that he would reach out and let me know. I was surprised at how easy it was for him to hook me up with a job, and not just a regular job, a well-paying job. After the picnic, we went to his house. The chemistry was there. When the kids went to bed, we were alone watching TV. I initiated, and we had sex. When we got home, my husband asked me why I wasn't picking up my calls. Instead of lying to him, I felt offended and became defensive. We started having marriage issues and arguing a lot more. Why I continued to see my ex-boyfriend on the side. True to his word, he connected me to another job that was making twice as much as before. One day, I went to my ex-boyfriend's house to see him. Why I thought my husband was home with my kids. After finishing at my ex-boyfriend's house, when it was time for me to go home, I came outside of my ex-boyfriend's house and was shocked to see my husband in front of my ex-boyfriend's porch, waiting for me. Me and my ex-boyfriend were confused. My husband immediately got into a fight with my ex-boyfriend, while another guy that came with my husband was holding them back. I would later find out that the guy was a private investigator, and he has been following me because my husband became suspicious of my behavior. I refused to go home with my husband because I told him that he needs to calm down. I went back into my ex-boyfriend's house while my husband waited outside. My ex-boyfriend wanted to call the police, but I told him not to because if he brings in the police, it would escalate into something worse. My husband was so upset, and rightfully so. I told my boyfriend that my husband would calm down. He later left the front porch. He left a message on my phone that he already threw my stuff out the house. I was more ashamed because he told my family as well, and they were calling me. I went home with two of my friends for protection because I was afraid of being alone with my husband. He also told some people at my church, and I couldn't even go to church anymore. The following day, I took my kids to stay with my parents. A week after not hearing from my ex-boyfriend, I called him, but he wasn't picking up my calls. I felt alone and lost. And to make matters worse, my husband is going through with the divorce and refusing any apology or reconciliation. To go from a stressful pandemic to losing my husband is very tough for me and my children. The only benefit out of this, if you can call it that, is that I now have a well-paying, stable job. Thanks to my